There's something really strange about money. You can be making more than before, more stable than before, but deep down, you still don't feel at ease. You still hesitate before spending. There's still this feeling you can't quite name, like everything is only temporarily okay, but not truly solid. I've realized that feeling doesn't come from how much money you have. It comes from something deeper, something most people have never really looked at directly. Most people don't notice this. The feeling of being not okay with money usually doesn't show up when you don't have money. It shows up when you start having a little more. You begin to spend more comfortably. Life, on the outside, looks more stable. You're not stressing over every small expense anymore. But at the same time, you start thinking more before every decision. A purchase is no longer just, do I have enough for this? It becomes, should I really do this? Will this affect me later? Am I losing control? What's interesting is, the more financial options you have, the harder it becomes to decide. And from there, a very quiet kind of pressure starts to build. Not pressure from not having money, but pressure from not knowing if you're actually on the right track with your money. Main idea 1. Financial pressure doesn't come from not having money. It comes from not knowing what you're actually building. I've realized something pretty paradoxical. A lot of people think, if I had more money, I'd feel less stressed. That sounds reasonable. But in reality, many people, once they start earning more, actually feel more anxious. Not because they lack money, but because they start realizing every financial decision has long-term consequences. A very everyday example. You start being able to upgrade your life. A better place to live. A more comfortable car. A more easy lifestyle. Nothing wrong with that. But the thing is, each of those choices isn't just an expense. It's a long-term commitment. A new standard of living. A new level of spending. A new baseline that you'll slowly get used to and find very hard to go back from. Most people don't realize what stresses them out isn't what they've spent. It's what they've quietly locked themselves into. Once you get used to a certain lifestyle, you're no longer just spending. You're maintaining. And maintaining always creates more pressure than starting. What's interesting is financial anxiety rarely shows up when you have nothing to lose. It shows up when you start having things you don't want to lose. And from that point on, money decisions are no longer isolated decisions. They become a bigger question. Am I building a life I'll have to keep chasing forever? And that's when money stops being just a tool. It becomes a system that you constantly have to keep from collapsing. The takeaway is, you're not stressed because you spend money. You're stressed because you're maintaining a life you're not even sure you truly want. Main idea 2. The more you try to control money, the more you feel like you're not in control. I've noticed something people rarely say out loud. People who think about money a lot usually aren't reckless spenders. In fact, it's the opposite. They're the ones trying to control everything. They track their spending. They think before buying. They worry about the future. From the outside, they look financially responsible. But on the inside, there's a familiar feeling. Something still isn't right. Most people don't realize, when you start taking control of money seriously, you also create an illusion. The illusion that, if you control things well enough, you'll stop worrying. But reality works the other way around. The more you try to control, the more you realize how much is out of your control. Costs can rise, income can change, opportunities come and go. You start to see, money isn't something you can fully control, and that realization makes you feel even more uneasy. A simple example, you sit there thinking about a purchase, not because you can't afford it, but because you're thinking, if I spend this, will it mess up other plans? Sounds reasonable. But when this happens too often, it creates a state where you're always calculating, and when everything needs to be calculated, you stop feeling free. What's interesting is, many people think they're controlling money, but in reality, money is controlling their emotions. Every decision carries a bit of tension, a bit of hesitation, a bit of fear of making the wrong move. And over time, money stops being a tool to improve your life. It becomes something you constantly have to manage just to avoid problems. The takeaway is, You're not tired because you don't have enough money. You're tired because you're trying to control something that will never be fully stable. Main idea 3. Feeling stable is often what makes you the most careless. I've noticed something very subtle. Most people don't run into financial problems when things are at their hardest. Sounds backwards. But when money is tight, you're very sharp. You know exactly how much you have, what you can spend, where your limits are. Everything is clear. But when life becomes a bit more stable, income is steady, expenses are manageable, nothing major goes wrong, you start to relax. Not because you're careless, but because it doesn't feel urgent anymore. And that's exactly when things start to shift. A small expense here, a new subscription there, a slightly upgraded lifestyle. Nothing alarming on its own. But what's interesting is, these changes don't happen all at once. They happen slowly, reasonably, almost invisibly. And that's why you don't notice them building up. A very everyday example. You get used to ordering food instead of cooking, used to choosing convenience over savings, used to thinking, I deserve a little comfort. Nothing wrong with that. But each little bit quietly becomes the new normal. And once something becomes normal, you stop questioning it. Most people don't realize the most dangerous spending isn't big spending. It's the spending you stop noticing. That's when money starts leaking without you feeling it. And because everything still feels fine, you don't stop until one day you look back and wonder, why am I making more but not saving more? The answer usually isn't one big decision. It's hundreds of small ones you don't even remember making. The takeaway is, you don't lose control of money when things are hard. You lose control when everything starts feeling too okay. Main idea 4. You don't lack money. You lack space. I've realized something very simple, but it completely changes how you see money. Two people can earn almost the same, live at a similar level, but one feels mentally light. The other constantly feels tense. What's interesting is that difference rarely comes from income. It comes from something most people overlook: space. The space between what you earn and what you're obligated to spend. Most people don't realize they're not really spending based on what they want. They're spending based on the lifestyle they've already built. And once that lifestyle is set, most of your income is no longer flexible. It's already been assigned: housing, living expenses, subscriptions, habits that have become automatic. And when almost all your income already has a destination, you're left with almost no space. Here's the thing. That space is what creates the feeling of safety. Not how much you make, not how much you have in your account, but the feeling that if something happens, I still have room to adjust. A very real example. Some people earn really well, but by the end of the month, there's almost nothing left. Not because they're careless, but because everything fits together too tightly. No margin, no buffer, no room for error. And when a system has no room for error, it becomes fragile. Just one small change, an unexpected expense, a month where income dips, and everything suddenly feels tight. On the other hand, some people don't earn that much, but they always keep some space. Not because they're cheap, but because they don't let life consume all of their income. They always leave a portion unassigned, and that part is what gives them peace of mind. The takeaway is, you don't feel like you lack money. You feel like you lack breathing room. Main idea 5. The more you try to make money certain, the more you lose the feeling of safety. I've realized something pretty contradictory. A lot of people spend a lot of time trying to make their finances feel more secure. They want a clear plan, a specific number, a roadmap they can trust. If I follow this, everything will be okay. Sounds reasonable, but what's interesting is, the more you try to make things certain, the more you realize they can't be. Life doesn't follow a plan. Income can change. Opportunities can appear out of nowhere. So can risks. And when you expect your finances to be perfectly stable, every small deviation feels like a problem. A simple example, you have a clear budget, a specific savings goal, but one month, things don't go as planned. Unexpected expenses, or maybe you're just tired and don't want to be that disciplined anymore. And immediately you feel, I'm doing something wrong. Not because you are, but because you expected everything to always go right. Most people don't realize feeling safe doesn't come from everything staying the same. It comes from knowing you can adapt when things change. But when you rely too much on a plan, you start fearing deviations, fearing loss of control, fearing the unexpected. And that's when a paradox appears. The more you try to control things to feel safe, the more vulnerable you feel, because you're depending on a system that is constantly changing by nature. The takeaway is, you don't lack certainty. You lack the ability to accept that money will never be fully certain. Main idea. 6. What stresses you isn't money. It's what you expect money to turn you into. I've realized something people rarely say out loud. Financial pressure doesn't just come from numbers. It comes from expectations. The expectation that if you earn more, you'll become more confident, more relaxed, more stable. But what's interesting is money doesn't automatically give you those feelings. It just amplifies what's already there. If deep down you still feel not enough, then even when you have more, that feeling stays. It just shows up in a different form. A very real example, when you don't have much money, you think, if I had more, I'd feel less stressed. But when you do have more, you start thinking, is this enough yet? Am I doing well? Am I falling behind others? The questions change, but the state stays the same. Most people don't realize they don't just use money to live. They use money to measure where they stand in life. And once money becomes a measuring stick, it never stops. There's always a higher level, a new standard, a better version of yourself you think you should reach. And from that point, money stops being a tool. It becomes pressure to prove something, not to others, but to yourself. What's interesting is, the more you try to prove it, the more you feel like you're not enough, because the standard keeps moving. The takeaway is, you're not stressed because of money. You're stressed because you expect money to turn you into a more complete version of yourself. Main idea 7. What you call a financial goal is often just a number you've never truly understood. I've realized something very subtle. A lot of people are chasing a number, a savings target, a financial milestone. But if you ask them, when you reach that number, what actually changes in your life? They often can't answer clearly. Most people don't realize many financial goals don't come from personal experience. They come from what they've heard. A number that sounds right, a standard that feels reasonable, a vague sense that I should probably aim for this. And so they start running. But what's interesting is, when you chase a goal you don't truly understand, you never feel like you're getting closer. A simple example, you set a savings goal, you work toward it, but along the way, you don't feel excited, you don't feel meaning, just a sense of, I should be doing this. And when you're close to reaching it, you start thinking about another number, higher, further, more correct, and the cycle repeats. Most people don't realize a goal without meaning doesn't create peace when you reach it. It just creates another goal. And from there, you're always in a state of trying, but rarely feel like you've arrived. What's interesting is, it's not that you're not achieving your goals. It's that you've never stopped to understand what those goals actually represent. A comfortable life, a sense of safety, freedom of choice. If you can't define that, then no matter how much you reach, it will still feel incomplete. The takeaway is, you're not tired of chasing money. You're tired of chasing numbers you've never truly understood. Main idea 8. What's holding your money back isn't your income. It's the decisions you no longer see as decisions. I've realized something very subtle. Money doesn't disappear because of big decisions. You always remember those. You think carefully before buying something expensive. You consider major changes seriously. In those moments, you're very aware. But what's interesting is, most of your money doesn't pass through those moments. It flows through things you no longer see as decisions. Most people don't realize there's a stage where every financial action is a choice, but over time, it becomes a habit. And once something becomes a habit, you stop questioning it. A simple example, You open your phone and say and make a transaction instantly, not because you urgently need it, but because you're used to doing it that way. You renew a service, not because you truly use it that much, but because you don't think about it anymore. You choose convenience, not because you compared options, but because you've chosen it before. Each time, nothing feels wrong. But what's interesting is, when a decision is no longer recognized as a decision, it's no longer controlled. And when it's not controlled, it can repeat over and over, daily, weekly, monthly. No big moment happens. But overall, everything shifts. Most people think, to improve financially, they need better decisions. But in reality, what matters more is noticing what you're doing, that you're no longer aware you're doing. And what's interesting is, once you start seeing these small patterns, you don't need to change everything. Just becoming aware of them already changes things. The takeaway is, money doesn't leave you because of bad decisions. It leaves you because of decisions you no longer recognize as decisions. I've realized there's one key difference between people who feel okay about money and those who constantly feel like it's not enough. It's not that they earn more. It's not that they're smarter. It's that they see money differently. They don't try to control everything. They don't chase vague numbers. They don't let life consume all of their income. They understand this. Money doesn't create a sense of safety. It reflects how you're living. If your system is too tight, you'll always feel pressure. If your system has space, you'll always have room to breathe. And once you start seeing this, you don't need to change everything right away. You just need to recognize where you are in that system. Because sometimes the most important thing isn't earning more, it's understanding how your money is actually operating. If any part of this felt like it was describing you, you might not need to change much. Just start paying a little more attention to the things you've never really noticed before. And if you want to understand more deeply how money is really shaping your life, consider subscribing, because some truths about money you only start to see after you've looked at them long enough.